Why was she always the one they overlooked? At the long oak table inside Fort Carson's briefing room, men shuffled their papers, adjusted their coffee cups, exchanged knowing looks. The voices around her filled the room with confidence, plans, routes, timings. All so certain, and there she sat, quiet in the back, her pen moving with calm precision across her notepad. She seemed ordinary, a 42-year-old logistics officer, a woman who lived for spreadsheets, timetables, fuel manifests, just another captain who had mastered the art of details. But the truth was heavier than the coffee steam rising into the fluorescent lights above. Because what none of them knew, what she never let slip, was that behind her steady hands and organized folders was a past written in dust, blood, and silence. Her name was Captain Sage Mitchell, and that morning, she looked like she was just taking notes, but her mind was somewhere else. 17 officers, 4 exits, 1 window facing east, vehicle depot beyond the glass. She didn't mean to count anymore, but her eyes did it on their own. Every space she entered, every room she walked into, her instincts whispered, "How many? Where are the exits? Which one will you take when the first shot cracks?" Those instincts had once saved her life. 73 times, in fact. 73 missions no one here would ever know about, because those years were buried under layers of classified seals and a discharge that read medical, but meant something else. She'd been broken, or so she thought. "Mitchell, are you even human?" The teasing voice pulled her back. Lieutenant Jake Morrison, too young to know the weight of real scars, grinned as he slid into the seat beside her. His coffee smelled burnt, his uniform slightly wrinkled. "You were at your desk before dawn. It's 7:30 and you haven't moved." Sage didn't look up from her notes. She only said, "Big operation today. 12 soldiers' lives depend on this convoy. There's no room for error." Jake laughed softly, shaking his head. He admired her but never understood her, no. One really did. The major cleared his throat at the front. Boots shuffled, papers hushed. The tactical display lit up with a bright map of Colorado highways. "All right, people, today's operation is straightforward. 3 forward operating. Bases need supplies, 8 vehicles, 12-man security detail. About 6 hours round trip, nothing unusual." Unusual? That word made her chest tighten. She had learned long ago that the word routine was the most dangerous lie in the military. The others scribbled numbers. She sketched something else. Choke. Points, ambush curves, elevated ridges. Her muscle memory didn't care that she now wore the badge of a logistics officer. Her brain still worked like a hunter and survivor. Red Alpha is the best option, Major Davidson announced confidently, tracing the main highway on the digital map. Fastest, most efficient, 4 hours in and out. Sage raised her hand before she could stop herself. "Sir." "With respect, Route Bravo is safer." The room went silent, heads turned. The major's eyebrows shot up. "This is logistics, not a combat drill, Captain. Fastest is best," he said. His tone laced with quiet mockery. Her voice remained calm. "Alpha has 2 critical vulnerability points. Curves at the 15 and 32-kilometer marks. Limited visibility. If hostile forces? Hostile forces?" The major almost chuckled. "Captain, are you expecting Taliban in Colorado?" Her mouth closed. She wanted to say, "I've seen ambushed on highways smoother than this, and valleys hotter than this, against enemies more patient than you can imagine." But saying that would mean explaining why she saw danger where they saw nothing. And that was a story she had buried 7 years ago. The briefing moved on. Route Alpha was approved. The officers filed out, laughing, relaxed. Another convoy, another routine supply run. But Sage lingered. Her pen tapped lightly against the folder. As Jake approached, "You never come into the field," he said with surprise when she told him she wanted to ride with the convoy. "Today feels like a good day for a change," she answered softly. The way her eyes held his should have told him something more, but Jake was too young to hear what wasn't spoken. By 10:30 a.m., the convoy rolled out under a Colorado sky. So clean, it looked painted. 8 vehicles, supplies strapped tight, soldiers leaning into their rifles like they'd never be needed. The hum of engines filled the morning. Sage sat in the lead vehicle beside Sergeant Williams, a man with 15 years of service and a steady jaw. He trusted protocols. She trusted instincts. Her gaze swept the horizon. Hills to the left, rocks to the right. Every rise in terrain became a sniper's perch in her imagination. Every shadowed cut in the road, a perfect place for an IED. She told herself it was just habit, just old scars replaying ghosts. But the ache in her chest told her something else. "Williams," she said, voice low, increased spacing. 50 meters between vehicles. He frowned. "Protocol says 30. 50. She repeated. He didn't ask again. Something in her tone carried authority no logistics officer should have had. He relayed the order. Engines slowed. Vehicles stretched across the asphalt. 15 kilometers passed. The first curve loomed. Her fingers tapped against her thigh. Old adrenaline. The kind that smelled like sand and gunpowder, she told herself. Again, this is Colorado, not Afghanistan. These are mountains. Not Helmand valleys, she told herself, but her pulse refused to lie. The radio crackled, then went dead. Williams twisted the dial. Nothing. Static. Silence. Sage's stomach turned cold. A radio blackout wasn't bad weather. It wasn't coincidence. It was step 1 in every ambush she had ever survived. "Stop the convoy," she said immediately. Williams blinked. "What?" "Stop now," brakes screeched. 8 vehicles lurched into silence along the lonely mountain road. Voices erupted on other radios, confused, questioning. Sage was already outside, boots crunching gravel, her eyes scanning the ridgeline with the urgency of a predator who smelled danger before the trap was sprung. And then she saw it, a glint, just a fraction of light off polished glass. Scope. Her breath stopped. She opened her mouth to shout. But the sound of the first RPG came faster. The trail of smoke cut through the bright sky, crashing into the road just meters behind the lead vehicle. The blast rattled steel, threw dirt into the air, and sent soldiers scrambling. Chaos erupted. Shouts, curses, gunfire crackling as shadows moved along the ridge. The convoy was under attack. Not in Afghanistan, not in Iraq, in the middle of Colorado. Sage pressed her back against a boulder, her chest heaving. She had 30 seconds. She always knew it was 30, the time between the first wave and the second. 30 seconds before. Snipers corrected their aim. 30 seconds before another RPG cut open steel and flesh. 30 seconds before 12 young men never went home. Sergeant Williams slid in beside her, eyes wide with fear. "Mitchell, what do we do?" "We've got no comms. I can't see how many hostiles." Her mind tore in 2 directions. Stay hidden. Stay the logistics officer. Let others handle it. Protect the secret she'd fought 7 years to bury. Or step forward, become again soldier she had sworn she'd never be. Use the training she had sealed away. Save them at the cost of herself. Her hands trembled. She remembered why she left. The nights waking up gasping, drenched in sweat. The constant vigilance. The weight of faces she couldn't forget. Delta Force had shaped her, then broken her. She had promised herself she would never return to that battlefield inside her own chest. But then she looked at Williams, 28 years old, a father, his kids waiting at home. She thought of Morrison, young and engaged, with a future he couldn't even imagine yet. Garcia, just 22, sending his paycheck to a mother who depended on him. Seconds ticked away. The next RPG screamed overhead. Dirt rained down, closer this time. Sage inhaled deeply, and the mask shattered. Her voice came out different. No longer the nervous officer with a clipboard. It was calm, cold, commanding. "Give me that radio," she ordered. Williams blinked. "What?" "Now." He handed it over, his eyes reflecting the shock of a man realizing the woman beside him was not who he thought she was. Sage keyed the radio, switching frequencies by muscle memory her hands hadn't forgotten. Her voice cut sharp and precise through the static. "This is lead. All units, dismount. Form staggered defense along the ridge. Sniper teams, glass the high ground. Watch for crossfire. We've got at least 3 shooters. Possible RPG crew. Move." The panic in the convoy stilled into action. Orders that shouldn't have come from her were obeyed instantly, because tone carries weight, and hers carried. "Years of buried war," Williams whispered. "Who are you?" Her eyes stayed on the ridgeline. Her finger traced the trigger of the rifle he hadn't noticed her take. Her body moved with a precision no logistics officer should possess. She didn't answer him. Not yet, because the fight had already begun. How do you explain to someone that you've lived this moment before? Not in this place, not in these mountains, but in another valley, half a world away, where the heat pressed down like a weight and the air smelled of dust and cordite. Sage didn't have time to explain. The second RPG slammed into the dirt just 20 meters behind them. The concussion rocked the convoy, shattering glass, throwing men flat against the asphalt. Soldiers screamed over the radio, but panic only lasted a heartbeat before her voice cut through the chaos again. "Left flank, cover fire. Right flank. Hold. Keep the ridge suppressed. Nobody exposes themselves more than 3 seconds. Move." Her words weren't guesses. They were muscle memory. Tactical instinct buried for 7 years, erupting now with surgical clarity. Williams crouched beside her, rifle trembling in his hands. His eyes darted between the ridgeline and her face. "Captain, how do you know?" "Not now," she said. Her eyes tracked the terrain with calm precision, searching for patterns. She could almost hear her old Delta Force instructor in her head. "Find the rhythm. Every ambush has one. Break their rhythm, and you break their advantage on the ridge." Muzzle flashes blinked like angry eyes. The sound of a K-fire echoed down the valley, sharper, more erratic than the disciplined return burst from the convoy. "They're not professionals," she muttered under her breath, "but they're determined." Williams blinked. "What?" 3-man sniper cell, 1 RPG crew, probably more waiting behind. If we stay pinned, we're dead. Another round slammed into the road, spraying hot fragments of asphalt. Soldiers dove behind tires and rocks. Williams swore under his breath. "We're boxed in." Sage shook her head. "No, they are." Her hand shot to the radio. "Morrison status." "Static, then." The young lieutenant's voice, ragged with adrenaline. 2 men down but alive. "Suppressing fire ineffective. We can't get a bead on the snipers." "Listen to me, Morrison," Sage said, her tone slicing through his panic like a scalpel. "They've rehearsed this. We break their rhythm, smoke grenades, left side. Blind their spotters, on my mark." She counted the seconds in her head. 1, 2, 3. Mark. Grenades arced through the air, plumes of gray smoke billowing across the ridge. Confused gunfire rattled from above. Less accurate now. She moved instantly. "Williams, with me. We're flanking left." He stared. "Captain, that's suicide. Trust." "Mamie." There was no time to argue. She sprinted low, weaving between rocks, her boots pounding the dirt with the rhythm of old training drills. Her lungs burned, but not from exertion, from memory. This felt too familiar. Too much like the mission she swore she'd never live again. Behind them, the convoy opened fire, filling the air with controlled bursts. Smoke masked their movements as Sage and Williams scrambled up the rocky incline. Halfway up, Williams stumbled. A round kicked up dirt inches from his helmet. He froze. Panic clawed at him. "They've got me zeroed." Sage grabbed his vest, yanking him behind cover with raw strength that surprised even him. Her face was steel. "Breathe, aim." Count to 3, then move. We do this together. Her calmness steadied him. He nodded, swallowed hard, and followed her lead. They climbed higher. Sage's eyes locked on the movement. A figure shifting behind a boulder, rifle scope glinting. She didn't hesitate. One squeeze of the trigger, and the figure crumpled. Williams gawked. That was a perfect shot. Keep moving, she said, voice flat, no pride, no time. The ridge thundered with gunfire. Another RPG hissed through the smoke, exploding harmlessly in the valley below. Sage and Williams pressed forward, flanking closer. When they reached the crest, Sage froze. 2 insurgents huddled near the launcher, fumbling with another round. Without thought, she advanced. One sharp strike with the butt of her rifle dropped the first. The second turned too slow. Her shot echoed, final and decisive. Silence fell on that side of the ridge. Williams stared at her like she was a stranger. His chest heaved, eyes wide, lips trying to form words. Captain, you're not just logistics. Sage avoided his gaze. Her heart pounded, not from the fight, but from the weight of what she'd just revealed. A piece of herself she'd buried had broken free. She keyed the radio. Convoy. Ridge left secure. Push forward. Keep defensive spacing. Snipers remain. Morrison's voice crackled back, awe edging through the static. Yes, ma'am. They regrouped at the convoy. Dust clung to sweat. Soldiers looked at her differently now, less like an officer with charts and clipboards, more like something they hadn't expected. But the ambush wasn't over as the convoy began moving. Again, a new burst of gunfire erupted from the opposite ridge. Bullets pinged off steel, forcing soldiers back down. Sage clenched her jaw. Of course, a classic L-shaped ambush. She should have predicted it. She exhaled slowly. Think. Break the rhythm. Turning to Morrison, she crouched beside him. How many grenades left? 4 smoke, 2 frags. Good. We're not outgunned. We're outmaneuvered. We changed the field. We changed the fight. He looked at her as if waiting for permission to trust. Tell me what to do. The admission struck her. Here was a lieutenant commissioned, educated, respected looking to her. The supposed logistics officer. For battlefield guidance, it felt wrong, and yet it felt exactly right. Stagger smoke to cover our retreat. Pull vehicles back 20 meters. Create an L shape of our own. Force them into crossfire. Morrison nodded, eyes widening as he understood. He barked the orders. Soldiers moved with renewed urgency. Smoke grenades hissed, creating a shifting wall of gray. Vehicles backed, engines rumbling like restless beasts. When the insurgents pressed forward, thinking they had the advantage, they stumbled into overlapping fields of fire. Bullets raked the ridge. One by one, shadows fell. The gunfire ebbed, then ceased. The mountain air rang with silence, broken only by ragged breathing. For the first time since it began, Sage let herself pause. Her shoulders sagged slightly. Adrenaline draining. Around her, soldiers began to realize they were alive. Because of her, Williams dropped beside her, sweat streaking his face. 12 men still breathing. You saved all of us. She didn't answer, her eyes locked on the road ahead. Her heart was still racing, because she knew something they didn't. Ambushes were never just ambushes. If there were hostiles here, in Colorado of all places, it meant something larger was at play. But she couldn't tell them that. Not yet. Morrison crouched near, studying her. His voice dropped low. Captain, who are you? She forced her expression to soften, though inside she was breaking. I'm exactly who you think I am. It was a lie, and he knew it. The convoy resumed. Engines roared back to life. Dust rose behind them as the vehicles pushed forward, scarred. But intact, the soldiers rode quieter now, not with relief, but with questions. Sage sat in silence, staring at the horizon. Her hands still trembled faintly, though she kept them hidden in her lap. Memories swirled faces of comrades lost, missions that ended in blood. She had locked them away for years. But today, those doors had blown open, and though she had saved 12 lives, part of her wondered if she had just doomed herself, because secrets don't stay buried forever. The radio finally crackled to life again. Faint but functional, the base commander's voice pushed through static. "Convoy, report. What happened out there?" Williams looked at her, unsure. Morrison did too. Their eyes silently asked, "What do we tell him?" Sage inhaled, steadying her voice before she pressed the mic. "Convoy engaged by unknown hostiles, ambush repelled, all personnel alive, continuing mission. Unknown hostiles?" The commander echoed, suspicious. "In Colorado?" "Yes, sir," she said flatly. "We'll debrief upon return." She released the mic and stared out the window. The mountains rolling past like silent witnesses, her jaw clenched. She could already feel the questions building, investigations, files pulled, histories dug up. The mask of the efficient logistics officer had cracked, and now she wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. But as she looked around the convoy, at Morrison bandaging a private's arm, at Williams checking ammo counts, at the young men whispering to one another, alive, she knew she would make the same choice again, because sometimes the cost of silence was 12 folded flags, and she couldn't bear that weight again. What do you say when your truth sounds impossible? When the story of survival isn't neat, when it doesn't fit the paperwork? The convoy rolled back into Fort Carson under a bruised sky. Dust clung to every vehicle, every uniform, engines cut out one by one, leaving a silence heavier than gunfire. Soldiers climbed down, eyes hollowed with exhaustion. But alive, every single one of them. Word traveled fast. By the time Sage's boots hit the pavement, officers from other units were already gathering, curiosity flickering in their eyes. Convoys didn't return from routine runs with shattered glass, bullet holes, and shaken men unless something had gone very wrong. Major Davidson was waiting, his arms folded, jaw tight. He scanned the battered vehicles, the pale faces, the faint smoke rising from bent metal. His gaze found her. It lingered too long. "Captain Mitchell," he said, voice clipped. "My office." Now, the soldiers exchanged glances. Williams started to step forward, as if to defend her, but Sage shot him a look that stopped him cold. She wasn't going to let them take the fall for what she had done. Inside the major's office, the air was thick. Colonel Thompson, the base commander, sat at the desk, a man carved from years of steel discipline. His presence sucked oxygen from the room. Davidson closed the door behind them, his expression sharp. "Sit," the colonel ordered. Sage did, her spine straight, her face unreadable. "Report," Thompson said. Her voice was calm. "Convoy encountered armed hostiles at the 15 and 32-kilometer marks en route. Alpha, ambush tactics, sniper fire, RPGs. We returned fire, suppressed, and neutralized the threat. No Kier, 2 wounded. Stable." Davidson barked a humorless laugh. "Hostiles in Colorado? This isn't Kabul, Captain. Are you seriously suggesting a coordinated insurgent attack on U.S. soil?" Sage's jaw tightened. She met his gaze evenly. "I'm reporting what happened." "Sir, don't play games with me," Davidson snapped. "I've seen those men out there, panicked, firing in every direction, and yet somehow they survived a textbook ambush. And somehow you, a logistics officer, took control of the fight like you'd rehearsed it 100 times. So I'll ask you plainly, who are you really, Captain Mitchell?" The room seemed to shrink. Sage felt every muscle in her body coil. For 7 years, she had rehearsed silence. She had lived inside her disguise so well that even she began to believe it. Efficient, invisible, safe, but silence had a cost. She inhaled slowly, her eyes flicked to Thompson. Unlike Davidson, the colonel's gaze wasn't mocking. It was measured, heavy, waiting. "I did what was necessary to save lives," she said finally. Nothing more, Davidson scoffed. Don't give me riddles. You moved like special operations. You issued orders no logistics officer should even know. Where does that come from? Her chest tightened. She wanted to look away. She wanted to lie. But then the image came. The faces of the 12 men who had walked back in the base tonight. Breathing, laughing nervously, calling home. 12 families that wouldn't be broken. By folded flags, her voice came quiet, almost reluctant. Delta, Davidson frowned. What? She raised her eyes. I served with Delta Force. 7 years, 73 missions. The room went silent. Even Davidson, ever ready with a smirk, blinked like someone punched the breath from him. The colonel's expression barely shifted. But something in his eyes sharpened. He leaned forward. Your record shows logistics only. Medical discharge PTSD. Because those years don't exist, Sage said flatly. They were classified, sealed, officially. I never fought. Officially, I was broken. Her words hung heavy in the room. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, the colonel leaned back, his hands folded on the desk. So why logistics? Why hide behind a clipboard? She swallowed. The truth scraped. Like glass. Because I couldn't live with it anymore. The nightmares, the weight. I thought if I buried it deep enough, I could survive. But today, she paused, steadying her voice. Today showed me that survival doesn't always mean silence. Davidson looked incredulous. You're telling me you've been sitting behind a desk all this time, wasting combat training most men would kill for? Not wasting, she said, a steel edge sliding into her tone. Healing, trying to. There's a difference. Thompson's gaze lingered on her. His silence was heavier than interrogation. Finally, he said, you saved 12 lives today. Her throat tightened. She wanted to brush it off, call it coincidence, deny it. But the memory of gunfire and smoke clung to her skin. No, sir, I just couldn't watch them die. The colonel nodded once, slow. That may be the difference between you and the rest of us dismissed. Captain, we'll speak again. She stood, saluted, turned. Davidson muttered something under his breath, but she didn't catch it. Her ears rang with the weight of what she had confessed. Outside the office, the hallway seemed too bright. Her boots echoed on tile. She caught sight of Morrison leaning against the wall, waiting. His uniform was torn. Dust streaked across his face, but his eyes burned with something different now. Not confusion, not fear, respect, and curiosity. 47, she whispered, barely audible. What? He asked. She paused, then met his gaze. You asked who I was out there. The answer is 47 operations. That's how many times I've done this before. Morrison swallowed hard. He didn't press. He just nodded, as if to say, I understand enough. That night, Sage sat in her apartment alone. The silence pressed against her. She opened a drawer she hadn't touched in years. Inside lay a medal wrapped in cloth, the silver star. She unwrapped it, held it in her palm. The metal glimmered faintly under the lamp. She remembered why she had hidden it. Not because it wasn't deserved, but because every time she looked at it, she didn't see victory. She saw the faces of the ones she couldn't save, the ones whose names she whispered into empty nights. But tonight, holding it again, she saw something different. She saw Williams calling his wife. She saw Morrison's relief. She saw Garcia, alive to send another paycheck home. Her hand shook as she closed the cloth around the medal. She placed it back, but not buried. Not hidden, just waiting. Her phone buzzed. A text. Williams, my wife wants to invite you for dinner. The kids want to meet the hero who brought their daddy home for the first time in years. Sage smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. She typed back, I'd be honored. Then she set the phone down and sat in silence, her mind swirling. She had broken her oath to never fight again. But maybe it wasn't breaking. Maybe it was finally healing, because the truth was becoming clearer. Sometimes survival isn't about burying your past. Sometimes it's about letting it breathe so others can too. How do you go back to being invisible once people have seen you? The question haunted her in the days after the ambush. Fort Carson moved with its usual rhythm morning drills, vehicles roaring across gravel, briefings filled with routine numbers. On the surface, nothing had changed, but Sage could feel the shift like a silent current. The glances that lingered a little longer, the whispered questions that floated through corridors. She was no longer just the efficient officer with spreadsheets and perfect fuel calculations. She was something else now, something they hadn't expected, and she hated it, because being invisible had been her shield. But shields crack when they're struck hard enough. The knock came 3 days later. A soldier at her door, crisp uniform, expression unreadable. "Colonel Thompson requests your presence, ma'am." Her stomach tightened. She knew what this meant. The colonel's office was dim, blinds half drawn. He sat behind his desk, Davidson standing to the side like a watchdog still nursing resentment. "Captain Mitchell," Thompson said, gesturing for her to sit. His voice was calm, but the weight behind it was undeniable. "We've reviewed the after-action reports. Eyewitness accounts. The ambush shouldn't have ended with 0 fatalities. Yet it did, because of you." Sage stayed silent. She didn't want praise. Praise cut deeper than bullets. Thompson leaned forward. "I won't waste time. Your cover's gone. Maybe not officially, but men talk. They saw you take charge. They'll never see you as just logistics again." Davidson scoffed. She disobeyed. Protocol. Took command of a convoy she had no authority to lead. This isn't something we reward. It's something we discipline. Thompson's eyes flicked toward him, then back to her. "Maybe, or maybe it's something we utilize." Sage stiffened. "Sir, with respect, I don't want combat reassignment. I left that life behind." Thompson nodded. "You won't return to combat. I'm not asking you to. What I am offering is an advisory role. Special operations consultation, train officers who've never seen an ambush before. Share your knowledge so they don't have to learn it the hard way. You'd save lives without picking up a rifle again." Her chest ached. Teaching. The word sounded both safe and terrifying. To speak out loud the things she'd buried, to turn memories into lessons. Was that healing? Or reopening the wound? "I need time," she said quietly. "You'll have it," Thompson replied, "but not much. Soldiers die when knowledge is hoarded." She rose, saluted, and left. Her hands trembled once she was outside, the cool air biting against her skin. That night she couldn't sleep. She paced her apartment, old ghosts circling. She remembered instructors barking commands, remembered deserts that swallowed sound, remembered the faces of those who never made it home. Could she carry that into a classroom? Could she make it useful? Or would it break her all over again? The decision came in a whisper, a memory of Morrison's voice crackling over the radio. "Tell me what to do." She realized then, maybe this was the only way forward. To stop hoarding her scars like shame, and instead let them guide others through. The fire. 2 weeks later, she stood in front of her first class. 8 soldiers, different backgrounds, different faces. Some were young lieutenants. Others were veterans reassigned after injuries. All of them carried that same unspoken question. In their eyes, what am I doing here? Sage set her folder on the desk. The room smelled faintly of dust and chalk. No one knew exactly what she was going to teach. Logistics? Tactics? Something else entirely? She started with a question. What's the difference between procedure and survival? The room was silent. Soldiers glanced at each other, unsure. Finally, one raised his hand. A Navy communications specialist, reassigned after a failed deployment. Procedure is what they write in the manuals. Survival is what happens when the manuals don't work. Sage nodded slowly. Exactly. And most of you are here because you've learned that lesson already, harder than you should have. They watched her, leaning forward. She walked to the whiteboard and drew a simple diagram, two rectangles connected by a line. A convoy. Then she added curves, ridges, blind spots. This was Route Alpha, the ambush point. On paper, it was safe, efficient. That's procedure. But instinct told me otherwise. And instinct only comes from scars. They listened in silence. Her voice was steady, but inside she trembled. Sharing this meant peeling open wounds. Yet as she spoke, she felt something she hadn't in years. Purpose. One soldier asked, "How do you balance staying ready with moving forward? How do you honor the past without being trapped in it?" The question hit her like a blade. She swallowed, searching for the answer she wished someone had given her years ago. "You serve however you can," she said softly. "Sometimes that means a rifle, sometimes a clipboard, sometimes a classroom. The shape of service changes. The purpose doesn't. The point is bringing people home." The room was still. For a moment, she thought she saw her old self reflected in their eyes. Not the broken version, but the one who knew why she fought. By the end of the session, something shifted. Soldiers who had walked in uncertain left with heads held higher. One even paused at the door and said, "Captain, you make it sound like what we went through wasn't just damage, like it can matter." Sage only nodded, but when the door closed, her chest tightened. Tears burned her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. That evening, she sat again with the silver star in her palm. For years, it had been a weight of shame. Now, maybe it could be something else. Proof, not just of survival, but of the responsibility survival brings. Later, Colonel Thompson found her in the hallway. "How was the class?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "Harder than combat, but maybe more important." He studied her, then gave a small nod. "Then we'll keep it going, Mitchell. You might just have found where you belong." But alone that night, as she sat in the dark, Sage whispered to herself, "Belonging doesn't erase the nightmares. It just makes them bearable." What if the very thing you ran from was the only thing that could heal you? The thought came to Sage late one night. After another session with her class of 8, she sat at her desk, the glow of her laptop painting her face in pale light. Notes covered the screen diagrams of convoy routes, breakdowns of ambush responses, lessons she thought she'd forgotten. But it wasn't just tactics she was teaching. It was survival, and survival wasn't written in manuals. It was written in scars. Word spread quickly through Fort Carson. Soldiers whispered about the new training sessions that weren't listed on official schedules, classes taught by the captain, who was supposed to be a logistics officer. Men and women who had once seen Sage as nothing more than a meticulous paper pusher now looked at her differently. Not with awe, she would never accept that, but with something rarer. Trust. Trust built on the kind of silence that came after firefights. Trust built on the unspoken understanding that she knew. One evening, after a session, a former Navy SEAL, who had been reassigned to communications, lingered behind. His face carried the heavy lines of someone who had seen too much too young. "Captain," he said quietly, "I thought my career ended when I was pulled from the team's injuries. You?" "No, they stuck me in comms. I hated it. Felt useless. But what you said today about service taking different shapes, it hit different." Sage studied him, saw the flicker of something she recognized. A man caught between who he used to be and who he was afraid he had become. "Your skills aren't gone," she told him softly. "They're just wearing a different uniform now. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The man nodded, a trace of relief crossing his features. For the first time since he'd been reassigned, it looked like he believed he still had value. Moments like that spread. Soldiers who had once felt discarded began to find direction. Suicide watch numbers dipped quietly, almost invisibly, but Sage noticed. She read the reports. 15%. Fewer incidents in 3 months. 15% fewer folded flags. Colonel Thompson noticed too. "Whatever you're doing," he told her during one meeting. Keep doing it. You've started something here. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she hadn't started anything, that all she was doing was trying to keep others from carrying the weight she had. But she stayed silent because deep down, she knew he was right. Still, silence followed her home each night. The nightmares hadn't disappeared. She still woke gasping, heart pounding, sweat soaking the sheets. Only now, the dreams were different. No longer just the faces of the dead. Now, sometimes, she saw the convoy. She saw 12 soldiers alive, walking into the light of Fort Carson because she chose to act. Her therapist, Dr. Patricia Hayes, called it post-traumatic growth. You're learning to reframe your past, Hayes explained during one session. You thought your scars were weakness. Now you're realizing they can be tools for others. Sage had sat in silence, her eyes downcast. Finally, she whispered, "For 7 years I thought I was broken. And now?" Hayes asked. Sage's voice trembled. "Now I'm not sure. Maybe. Maybe I was just waiting." The change was slow, but it was real. 6 months after the ambush, Sage's program, now unofficially called the Sage Protocol by soldiers, was expanded base-wide. Officers began pulling their men into her sessions. Veterans reassigned to quiet roles found themselves asked to teach, to share, to lead again. The culture shifted. During one training exercise, Sergeant Williams spotted a potential hazard that would have been overlooked in the past, an unsecured ammo stack near a live-fire drill. He stopped the exercise, corrected it, and prevented what could have been a deadly accident. Later, he admitted to Sage, "I only caught it because you drilled into me to see differently. You taught me not just to follow procedure, but to think like someone who's already lived the worst case." Lieutenant Morrison, once a paper-shuffling officer, began poring over advanced tactical manuals in his free time. He requested more training, more field exposure. During a leadership seminar, he told junior officers, "Captain Mitchell showed me that leadership isn't about giving orders. It's about having the skills and the clarity to protect your people when everything falls apart." Even Colonel Thompson, a man hardened by decades of service, quietly initiated a review of personnel files. He began searching for other hidden specialists like Sage men and women tucked away in unassuming roles, their skills forgotten or ignored. It was as if one ambush had opened a door no one could close again. And yet, for Sage, the change was more intimate. One weekend, William's wife invited her for dinner. She hesitated at first, unsure if she could face the warmth of a family she didn't belong to. But when she walked through the door, 2 children ran forward, hugging her legs, calling her the hero who brought their daddy home. The word hero still felt wrong, but she didn't correct them. That night, as she sat at the table, laughter echoing, food steaming, she realized something she hadn't felt in years. She was part of life again, not just observing from the shadows, but living it. Later, William's wife pulled her aside. "You don't know what it means to have him here, to have him safe. My kids will grow up with a father because of you." Sage's throat tightened. She nodded, unable to speak. When she returned to her apartment, she stood for a long time staring at the silver star. For years, it had been a reminder of guilt. Tonight, it felt like a reminder of possibility, but not everyone welcomed the change. Major Davidson remained a thorn, questioning her methods, muttering about unorthodox programs. "This is still the Army," he warned one day, cornering her in the hallway. "We don't run on feelings in therapy circles. We run on orders and discipline." Sage met his glare with calm eyes. "Orders keep people moving. Experience keeps them alive. You should know the difference." He had no response, but she could see it in his eyes' resentment. Not all enemies carried rifles. Some wore the same uniform. Despite that, the momentum kept building. Other bases began requesting details about the Specialized Skills Integration Program. Suicide rates among transitioning operators dropped sharply wherever it was introduced. Soldiers who once felt abandoned began finding purpose again. One afternoon, Morrison approached her after class. His voice was hesitant. "Captain, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead. Why did you leave Delta Force?" The question cut deeper than gunfire. She paused, staring out the window at the training field beyond. Soldiers ran drills, shouting commands, laughter spilling into the air. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet. "Because I thought I was broken. Because the nightmares never stopped. Because I couldn't see how to live in both worlds, soldier and human." Morrison frowned. "And now?" She turned to him. Her eyes were softer than he'd ever seen. "Now, I understand something. Healing doesn't mean forgetting who you are. It means learning how to carry it without letting it crush you." He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. That night, Sage wrote in her journal something she hadn't done in years. "The ghosts don't leave, but maybe they can walk beside me instead of chasing me." What happens when your private battles suddenly become national headlines? Sage Mitchell never wanted the spotlight. She had built her life on silence, on blending in, on hiding behind the anonymity of routine. But sometimes silence echoes farther than words, and her silence, broken on that mountain road, was now reverberating far beyond Fort Carson. 6 months after the ambush, she received the call. "Captain Mitchell," the orderly said, standing at her office door, Pentagon, "wants to speak with you." Her pen froze above the page. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard Pentagon. She was just beginning to breathe again here, in the rhythm of teaching, of helping a handful of soldiers see their worth. She wasn't ready for Washington. She wasn't ready for the weight that word carried. But by that afternoon, she was seated in a secure conference room, the air heavy with tension. Maps lined the walls. A flag stood in the corner, and across the table sat General Patricia Hayes, a 3-star officer whose very presence seemed to bend the air. "Captain Mitchell," the general began, her voice both firm and warm, "your story has reached higher levels than you realize. More importantly, your results have." She slid a folder across the table. Numbers, charts, reports. Sage's eyes scanned the pages. 23% decrease in veteran unemployment at bases using her program. 31% increase in successful civilian career transitions. 42% reduction in PTSD-related incidents among Special Operations veterans. Sage blinked, her throat tightening. She had known the program was helping. But seeing the numbers like this, cold, undeniable proof hit harder than any metal. Hayes leaned in. "We believe what you've started here shouldn't stay at Fort Carson. We're creating a new position, Director of Special Operations Personnel. Integration. You'd work directly with the Pentagon. Expand your program to every branch of the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Coast Guard, all of them." The words hung in the air like a weight. Director, Pentagon, National Responsibility. Sage stared at the folder, her reflection faintly visible in its glossy cover. Part of her wanted to laugh. 7 years ago, she couldn't even face her own nightmares, and now they wanted her to guide thousands of others through theirs. Her voice came quiet. "General, I need to ask, would this position require me to reveal my operational history? My time with Delta?" Hayes shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. Your service remains classified. This is about transition, not disclosure. You've proven that lived experience can be transformed into a resource. That's all we want to harness." Sage nodded slowly, but her chest felt tight. She thought of Fort Carson, of her small apartment, of the quiet dinners with William's family, the laughter of children who didn't call her captain, just Sage. She thought of her classes, the hesitant questions, the breakthroughs that felt fragile but real. If she left, would that all unravel? "General," she said carefully, "I'm honored, but I need time. This isn't just a job. It's my life." Hayes studied her, then gave a small nod. "Take the time you need. "But Captain, thousands of veterans are waiting for someone to fight for them the way you fought for your 12. Remember that." That night, Sage sat at her kitchen table, the folder open in front of her. She read the numbers again and again. Lives saved, futures secured, ghosts quieted. Her phone buzzed, a call from Sergeant Williams. She answered, his voice steady, familiar. "Captain, my oldest asked me tonight what a hero is. I told him it's someone who doesn't quit on you, someone who carries you through the fire. He asked if that's you, and I told him yes." Her eyes burned. She swallowed hard. "Williams, I'm not." "Yes, you are," he interrupted. "And if you're thinking about turning down whatever they offered you, don't. Because there are a lot of people out there who don't have someone like you. Yet, you can change that." After the call ended, she sat in silence, staring at the metal still tucked in its cloth. Once it had been her reminder of everything she lost. Now it felt like a key to everything she still had to give. The next morning, she walked across base, the weight of decision pressing with every step. Soldiers nodded to her as she passed, not out of formality, but out of something deeper, respect. Gratitude, hope. Inside the office, she dialed a number in the folder. When General Hayes answered, Sage's voice was calm. "General, I'll accept." There was no applause, no ceremony. Just a simple acknowledgement on the other end. "Good? Then let's get to work." And just like that, the quiet life she had built was gone. Weeks later, she stood in Washington, the Pentagon looming around her, hallways buzzing with officers, aides, and analysts. She felt out of place among the suits and medals, her boots echoing on polished floors. But when she entered the room to brief a group of senior leaders, her voice found steadiness. "Every day, across our military, there are men and women hiding extraordinary capabilities behind ordinary assignments. They are our hidden assets. And if we fail to recognize them, we fail our mission. My proposal is simple. Identify them, support them, and let them serve in ways only they can, because survival isn't about burying the past. It's about using it." The room was silent. Some nodded, some scribbled notes. And Sage realized something she hadn't before. She wasn't just telling her story anymore. She was telling their story. Every hidden soldier, every buried skill, every scar turned into a lesson. That night, alone in a quiet hotel room overlooking the city lights, Sage sat by the window. She thought about the ambush, about the convoy, about the moment she decided to step out from behind the mask. She whispered to herself, not as a soldier, not as an officer, but as a survivor finally learning to lead in a different way. Maybe healing isn't silence. Maybe healing is service. What if one story could change an entire culture? Sage Mitchell hadn't asked for that burden. She hadn't asked to be a symbol or a program, or the name whispered in conference rooms, thousands of miles from the Convoy road where it all began. She had just tried to save 12 men, but sometimes a single choice is enough to bend the path of countless others. Months into her new role, she watched the numbers spread across reports like ripples in a pond. Suicide rates falling, veteran retention rising, transition success stories multiplying. Bases that had once treated their injured or reassigned operators like ghosts now brought them into classrooms, training fields, command tables, but statistics were cold things. What mattered were the people. One case landed on her desk. A Navy communications specialist, quiet, overlooked, his file read routine, but buried deep was a past as a SEAL cyber. Expertise that could have shielded entire fleets from digital threats. He had been reduced to filing reports because no one asked who he really was. Sage met him in a dim office one winter morning. His eyes were guarded, his shoulders tense. "You think my past matters now?" he asked bitterly. "They didn't care when they sent me here." Sage leaned forward, her voice calm. "It mattered enough to keep you alive. And it matters enough to protect others. You can keep hiding behind this desk, or you can teach the next generation what only you know. Silence stretched. Then, slowly, his eyes softened. For the first time, he looked less like a man discarded and more like one rediscovered. Another file. An Air Force meteorologist on paper. His job was weather, clouds, wind, forecasts. But his history revealed he had once been a combat controller, trained to call in precision airstrikes with terrifying accuracy. Now, he was filling out reports about rainfall. When Sage met him, he laughed bitterly. They reduced me to a weatherman. She didn't laugh. No, they gave you a chance to breathe. But that doesn't mean your skills vanish. It means they're waiting. And right now, we need them. The man blinked, the corner of his mouth twitching. Hope flickered like the first spark of a fire. Story by story, file by file, hidden heroes. Emerged Rangers reassigned to motor pools, Marines working in kitchens who once led recon teams. Soldiers dismissed as damaged, who carried lessons written in scars no textbook could teach. Sage's team began cataloging them all, creating a database of skills the military hadn't realized it already possessed. For the first time, the system wasn't discarding its wounded, it was listening to them. And yet, for every success, Sage felt the cost. The calls at midnight, the letters from families, the weight of soldiers who had slipped through the cracks before the program existed. Men and women who didn't live long enough to see their purpose recognized, their ghosts pressed on her shoulders. One night, after a grueling day of briefings, she sat in her Pentagon office long past midnight. The city lights blinked outside, a quiet hum beyond the glass. A young captain knocked softly on the door, hesitant. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you. I was ready to walk away. Thought I had nothing left to give, but your program showed me I could still serve. Different, but still serve. You saved my life." Sage smiled faintly. But when he left, her hands trembled, because gratitude was heavier than resentment. Gratitude reminded her that if she faltered, if she failed, the weight wouldn't just be hers. It would belong to all of them. General Hayes noticed the strain. During one late meeting, she said, "Captain, you're carrying this as if it's all on your shoulders. It isn't. You started it. But this culture shift, it belongs to everyone now. Don't forget that." But how could she forget? Every report carried echoes of her own story. Every hidden hero was another version of herself. One morning, she visited Fort Bragg to observe a new class of instructors. Men and women who had once hidden their past now openly teaching recruits. She sat quietly at the back, watching as a former Ranger sniper demonstrated marksmanship to wide-eyed lieutenants. His hands were steady, his voice calm. "Every bullet has two stories," he told them. "The one it ends, and the one it saves." Sage felt her chest tighten. Those words could have been hers. She realized then, the culture was changing not because of her, but because the truth she carried was being multiplied through others. And yet, even as progress spread, resistance lingered. Some commanders grumbled that the program blurred lines of discipline, but it gave too much weight to personal scars. One memo called it therapy disguised as training. Sage read it, her jaw tightening. She didn't respond with anger. She responded with results. Another quarter passed. Numbers climbed higher. Lives kept being saved. Slowly, the grumbling turned to silence. Still, she wasn't immune to doubt. Alone in her apartment one evening, she stared at the silver star on her shelf. For years, it had been hidden in a drawer. Now it sat in the open, but it still carried its double edge. She whispered into the quiet, "Am I healing, or just hiding behind a different mask?" No answer came, only silence. But the next morning, as she stepped into another briefing, another classroom, another conversation with a soldier who thought he was broken, she understood something deeper. Maybe healing wasn't a destination. Maybe it was a choice you made every day, and some days, that choice was enough. What do you see when you look at someone in silence? Do you see only the uniform, the job title, the clipboard in their hands? Or do you wonder what shadows, what secrets, what stories lie just beneath the surface? For years, no one wondered about Captain Sage Mitchell. She was the quiet officer in the corner, the woman with flawless spreadsheets, the one who never raised her voice. To most, she was invisible, ordinary. But ordinary is a mask, and masks only last until the moment the world demands truth. Now, years after that ambush on a Colorado road, Sage walked through the halls of the Pentagon, her boots echoing on polished floors. But she wasn't hiding anymore. She was no longer just a logistics officer, no longer just a veteran trying to bury her past. She was something more, a bridge, a reminder, a living proof that scars could be maps for others to follow. Her program had spread across every branch of the military. Navy bases, Air Force wings, Marine units. Everywhere she went, she saw the same transformation. Veterans once sidelined were now instructors, advisors, mentors. Soldiers who thought their purpose had ended discovered it was only changing shape. At one base, she met a young recruit who whispered shyly, "My instructor said he used to be broken, but now he teaches because of you." At another, a commander admitted, "I used to dismiss my veterans when they transferred out of combat. Now I see them as assets I can't afford to lose." The culture had shifted, quietly, steadily, but undeniably. And yet, even as others celebrated, Sage remained cautious. She knew healing wasn't a straight line. Every success story was balanced by another soldier still struggling in silence. Every progress report reminded her of those who hadn't made it. One evening, she found herself back at Fort Carson, standing alone at the training field where it had all begun. The air was crisp, the mountains silhouetted against a fading sky. She walked slowly, her boots crunching on gravel, her hand brushing the rough wood of the fence line. She remembered that morning, the convoy, the radio silence, the decision that shattered her disguise. She remembered William's pale face, Morrison's frightened voice, Garcia's youth. And she remembered the split second when she had chosen to act, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't live with not acting. That choice had saved 12 lives, but it had also saved her own. Williams joined her at the fence, older now, his uniform worn, but his eyes steady. "You ever think about that day?" he asked softly. "Every day." Sage admitted. He nodded. "Me too. But not because of the fear, because it showed me something. That leadership isn't about rank. It's about responsibility. And you taught me that." Sage smiled faintly. "You give me too much credit." "No," he said firmly. "I give you exactly what you earned." They stood in silence for a while, watching the last light fade. Finally, Williams added, "You know, my kids still talk about you to them. You're not a soldier. You're the reason their dad came home. That's what matters." Her throat tightened. She didn't reply. Because some truths don't need words. Later, back in her apartment, she sat once more with the silver star in her hand. For years it had been hidden, a reminder of loss. Now she held it openly, the metal warm against her palm. She thought about what it meant, not glory, not perfection, not even victory, but endurance, survival, the stubborn refusal to quit. And she realized something she wished she had known years ago. Dignity doesn't always speak. It doesn't shout or demand recognition. Sometimes dignity is quiet. Sometimes it fills out supply manifests. Sometimes it teaches in small classrooms. And sometimes, when 12 lives hang in the balance, it acts. Sage placed the medal on her shelf. Not hidden, not flaunted, simply present, a reminder. The next morning, she addressed a new group of officers. Her voice was steady, her presence calm. "You may think your past defines you, that your scars mark the end of your usefulness, but scars are not the end. They're proof that you survived, that you learned. And survival is a lesson worth teaching." The room was silent. Some nodded, some blinked back emotion. She let the silence linger, then added softly, Your story may not be written in medals or headlines. It may be written in the quiet choices you make when no one is watching. But those choices matter. They ripple. They save lives. And sometimes they save your own. As the session ended, she stood back, watching the officers file out. She knew some would forget her words by tomorrow, but maybe one wouldn't. Maybe one would carry it into the field. And maybe, one day, that would make all the difference, Sage. Mitchell's journey wasn't about heroics. It wasn't about headlines or glory. It was about something far simpler and far harder. The strength to act when silence was easier. The courage to teach when hiding was safer. The grace to turn pain into purpose. And her story leaves us with a truth worth remembering. We never truly know the people around us. The quiet coworker, the calm teacher, the neighbor who always seems steady. Any of them could be carrying stories that would astonish you. Stories of battles fought, losses endured, lessons earned in silence. Hidden heroes walk among us every day. And sometimes, when the moment demands it, they remind the world that true strength never disappears. It waits, patiently, until it's needed most, because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.